give you a little history on this field, and then I'll turn it over to these individuals. But this is a warm season, full season cover crop. We seeded this June 30th. The reason why we seeded it somewhat later, we attempted to make a graze on the rye. Seth had planted this to winter annual rye last year, and it actually ended up being our best rye field, where we had the most biomass. And we waited for the biomass to come, and then we weren't going to get the livestock, and then we decided to get them, and we wanted to put them on. And when we ended up grazing it, we grazed through it very quickly. They didn't like it. It was too far along. And then June 30th came, and then we seeded the cover crop into it. And there's a list of the species on the sheet here, and I won't say much more. I'll just turn it over, and we'll let whoever would like to chime in first, we'll go. So, Jimmy?
Well, this would remind you of home. This is what we love to do back at home. We just finished up seeding ourselves. We were very, very dry, just like y'all early on. And then when harvest got there, we got blessed, and we got half our annual rainfall in the next 3 weeks, which is normally not the case at home this time of year. We love this. We talked a little bit about this earlier today and last night. You risk a little bit by seeding it like this, but the reward can be great. I mean, we're one rain away from this just exploding. It's not going to use much water right now. It's going to survive along here, and if we can catch a rain and things cool down a little bit like today, there'll be a great opportunity to take a lot of beef or whatever off of this if you want to in grazing, or just another great cover of the living root in the ground. I think that's very important. It's very challenging in this atmosphere, much like in western Oklahoma. We're always challenged as well, but we've learned that the benefit is by far exceeds the risk, because when you do get that rain, then you have all sorts of opportunities, and you can make your own luck or you can not, and you just have a fallow field. And what we've learned in all our work and studies on our place, that fallow is a deathbed. We don't like fallow at all, because it's disastrous to the biology. And one of the things that we've learned is that biology is the king to making this system work. And so they don't have a lot to feed on here, but they do have something below ground. They do have a root, they do have a house, and they can work here. So, this is exactly what I would do in our environment. Other than Daryl, I would have grazed it a little bit earlier. But, no system's perfect. And that's what I love about adaptive grazing. You got to adapt on the go. And sometimes cattle are issues, timing's issues, but once again, you just adapt and go, and that's worked well for us.
Well, I guess the main thing I'm seeing in this spot is there is something green. The soil looks like it's that would be called a sandy loam, Jay? It's the sand lens on this end. Okay. So it has to work just to get some carbon in the soil the way it is, and it's teaching us something, and it. We did get some good grazing time. We got some use out of it because of the graze. Thing about rye is it was planted last year, so then that comes up. We could have, just like you said, if we'd have used it a little bit earlier, could have got probably a few more pounds out of it. And but you're actually getting a use out of this early this spring. You're able to get them off. Say if you have a native pasture or something like that, you can keep them off of that longer, have them into this rye cover and get some good pounds, young grass coming up, and then in theory, in most just about any year but this one, you would have a lot more growth in the cover crop. But it is just like Jimmy said, it's coming right along. I mean, if we got some good rains, it would really take off, because it's all there. It's just a little bit hurting. So I guess that's what I'm seeing.
So on our place, we utilize rye for early spring grazing to give our native grasses a good head start. This year we had about 180 acres of rye that we grazed with our yearlings. We actually went through it 2.5 rotations early on. We no-tilled a cover crop in about June, the second week in June, and it's looking a little bit better, but we've caught more rains just 15 miles away than they have. One thing that I want to say to everybody is, we're all looking for a recipe, right? Do this, be successful. That's not the case when you're managing chaos. What works for me might not work for you guys, so my cover crop is quite a bit taller than the Minokan farm, and we're just 15 miles away. So you just gotta be adaptive. You gotta plan. You gotta think things through, and you gotta have all your options open to plan F. So just being fluid and trying new things. So maybe next year, one good thing, we've had trouble with the cattle don't like the rye because it grows, if you're not on it right away, it'll get ahead of them and they will bawl at you. Maybe mix some winter wheat or some winter trid along with the rye, and then you get an early on, and then a mid, and then a later maturing winter biennial. So that'd be one thing to do, and yeah, you just, like I said, we're managing chaos, and you just got to take it one revolution at a time, I feel. So.
Yeah, kind of. A lot of times we talk about, oh, that guy got lucky, or, doing some of these things that are a little off, and it's like, well, he's lucky, everything turned out. Why don't you, set yourself up for luck? And it's kind of like this. It's all set up to where we have, multi-species out there that, yeah, whenever that rain does come, boom, this stuff can really explode. And by having a multi-species mix in there, every year's going to be different. One year, one species is going to really be your star, but other years it won't be. And kind of when I'm looking around at this and looking at all the different species, a lot of times the different species I've found out are interacting with each other to make them even more robust. I mean, like some of the forage sorghum, where it's really close to, some of the rape. And I've noticed that down in our country, whenever that a corn plant or a grass plant is by the rape, there's some association there that it just really brings it on. And if you see some of these that are really spiking up, a lot of times right next to it will be a rape. But like I say, having the diversity out here, it's going to set you up for luck. But it's kind of planned luck. So, whenever that rain comes, we'll have something here.
All right. Do you guys know that you will never be a professional farmer? Right? A professional, how many times do you think like a professional basketball player takes a free throw? How many times in their career? Hundreds of thousands, right? Yeah. Well, as a farmer, how many times do you grow the same crop in your lifetime? Maybe 10, right? So it's all new to everybody all the time. So there's never you're never going to get good at what you're doing. I'm just going to say that. So these years happen. To me, this is similar to what we're looking at home right now on our cover crops. My one question here was, this is fall rye? Was it fall rye? Okay, well, fall rye, from what I remember, I've done the experiment with fall rye a few times. It's actually an Alleopathic. So as it grows, it puts out a chemical out of its root systems very similar to 2,4-D. So it'll actually inhibit the growth of the broadleafs around it. So is that something that's maybe happening here? You don't think so? Broadleafs are doing all right? Okay, well, that's a risk. I know I did an experiment years ago. I had fall rye in one field and not in the other, and it has a 1-year residual, and we had no broadleafs in the next year's barley crop, none. And the one that wasn't fall rye, it was just full of everything, bindweed and thistle and all sorts of stuff. So something to think about with fall rye is be careful what you're seeding after. But I did a pasture cropping, cover crop into a pasture in 2015, and it ended up being a drought that year too. So we had the same thing happen. All these little seedlings came up. I had these beautiful little seedlings, and everything went yellow and browned off and died. So it happens. I believe I proved it worked. What I purposely did, this was going into an established pasture, and I purposely overgrazed it in the spring. I grazed it once early on with one herd that came in and sent them along. And then 2 weeks later, I brought in my other herd and grazed the same one again, right? Which you're not supposed to do when you're grazing. So I was really trying to set that back. And then we seeded into it. They came up great, was looking really good. And then we didn't get any more rain for like the rest of the season, basically. So they didn't survive. But from the first month of it, boy, it looked like they were going to do really well. So you're never going to, hit it right every time. A couple of years ago, I did a cover crop, just a broadcast and trample. Threw the seed out there. Cows went out, about 400 head went out there and grazed it in a day. Harrowed it all in for me, basically. I had a, 2.5 to 3 foot high cover crop, just beautiful that year. So you tell me the year that you're going to get the perfect growing conditions, I'm going to tell you the year that this is going to work. Deal? It's all about a water cycle. It's all about a water cycle. Right? Droughts, floods. Well, I know, 3 years ago we had, Alberta had a blanket of smoke come across us, and the entire month of August we had no growth. It just covered it. So yeah, that's definitely detrimental to us. But it all comes down to a water cycle, right? If we could fix the water cycle on a global scale, a whole bunch of this stuff goes away. Floods, droughts.
Yes. Yes.
What do you think about, do you guys think that you're going to plant your winter rye if it doesn't rain and hope for rain in the spring, or is those two the plan?
We're going to... Right. Good question, Caleb. We're going to plant some rye again. We'll pick and choose our fields, and we'll sit down and decide that. But no, the option is not to plant it, or we're going to plant. One thing I would say, about 3 weeks ago, this actually looked a lot better. This last heat kind of really took this out, but not that matters. But we'll we're going to keep seeding and doing what, obviously it can't grow in the bin, but these were about an inch, inch and a half. Yeah. We had 60-inch corn in it last year, and then we had 60-inch corn in it the year before, too, with covers. Last year the covers on the obviously it was real dry last year too, and our 60-inch corn, we ended up grazing this, and then after we were done grazing it, this was the last field we seeded to rye. And I think we did it, Seth, his memory's way, I think in October, the 10th maybe. So, and then it ended up having the most biomass on it, and which still wasn't a lot. And we would have done better on our grazing had I had them there earlier. There's no question. Jimmy was right. But any questions for these guys, individuals? Yes.
Sir, you called the winter rye some kind of scientific name. I don't remember what it was, but that's broadleaf. Is there any more examples that you have of that?
An
That's it.
however you say it. We're Canadian. It's an allelopath. It'll put out a chemical somehow that allows it to be more competitive. The other one I know of is quackgrass. It actually puts out a chemical while it's decomposing as the material's breaking down. But fall rye it puts it out while it's growing. But there will be a 1 year residual on the fall rye, I know. So, but yeah, that's about all I know for those two. Not that I know of.
No. One thing I will say though, we plant a lot of soybeans, which is a broadleaf, into rye all the time. Planting green, obviously, we really promote that, and so, and we see no effect, or if we do, it's not, we just don't see it. But that's just our thought.
Between winter rye and fall rye. Same thing.
Cereal rye, biennial, yep. Any more questions for Jimmy?
So I wanted to address, will you plant? So I want to tell a little bit short story. In 2017, we were this dry as well, and I planted rye in the fall behind my beans and peas and different crops, and it laid in the furrow for a little over 112 days, and I thought it was one of my biggest failures since I started. We did catch a little snow and a few hundredths and a few tenths of rain in the spring, and lo and behold, it got up. It's about this tall, and we had a big wildfire that burned half the county, about 400 and some thousand acres out of 3 counties, and I was able to save my cow herd by putting them on the rye and getting them out of the fire. And so my biggest failure turned into my biggest savior. And that's what I was talking about a while ago, by taking the chance. We take chances every day, and they don't all work out. We know that, but you got to take the chance and take the faith that it's going to work out. Sometimes it's just not going to work out. I've had a failure. My summer covers last year died because it never rained. But once again, I planted again when it did. And so we're going to plant, and it has worked out for us. We're all going to fail once in a great while, no matter what we do, and that's how we learn, and that's how we adapt.
Just one item on the broadleaves going into the rye. So we do seed our soybeans into standing green rye. We terminate that after the beans are up. Okay. And so it helps us get by the alleopathic impact. And does rye have it? Yes, it does. Can it be managed? Absolutely. And so that's our method of managing it. And so we have the emergence while it's live, and then terminate and let it decompose and give off a higher level of alleopathic impact after that. Then it doesn't. The beans have no issue with that. And so, but it's always management. And
Any other questions for these gentlemen? Glyphosate. Yeah.
If you left the stand rye, like what the cows wouldn't eat, will it reseed itself this fall? I mean, not necessarily this.
I don't think this would. Some good rye would, I think.
Triticale too?
Yeah. It won't be as easy.
I'm gonna find out.
It's more challenging, but it can.
Any other questions for these guys before we move on?
Is there any kind of a winter annual legume you can seed with your triticale that'll survive in this country?
Hairy vetch works really well, but
Really?
it turns into a weed if you're doing cropland type stuff.
Winter peas.
We
Also done some alfalfa. Just put a little alfalfa in with it. If I kind of like what you're talking about. Well, hope the rye kind of comes back. Put a little bit of alfalfa in there. Pound. It doesn't take a whole lot, and that stuff kind of keeps coming back too. That
Yeah, you can't hardly kill alfalfa.
Right. So if that's your plan, is to kind of graze it, then yeah, throw in what you can afford.
These winter peas aren't hardy enough for up here.
we've messed around a little bit with winter peas, and we haven't had much luck.
What about spring peas, Jay? Have you tried?
Spring peas in the fall.
Yep, they'll last. They'll do good. Oh, really? They're for us. They're better than winter pea.
Yes.
Question for the guys. What do you think the effect of mob grazing would have been on this? I mean, through tight quarters where it's covered, everything's covered with manure.
One of the big issues for me with mob grazing on grain land in my environment is if it gets too wet, right? Because we can destroy a piece of land. I need, if I'm going to be going on with high stock densities onto some grain land, I need a place to go, right? I need an escape route, and sometimes I don't have that, or so I'll actually turn one down, like 'cause I don't seed it. It's not my land. Yeah, there's been a couple times we've done some damage because we've had too much. So that's something just to warn you about. I mean, yeah, mob grazing, they would have stepped everything down, knocked it down more, but you've also got to balance out your labor as well. There's a lot of, if the higher your intensity gets, the more labor you're going to put into it. So there's got to be an economic threshold somewhere in there, and it depends on the size of the herd, depends on the distance, where it is. There's lots of variables on that, but yeah. I would say none of this would be standing. It'd be flat on the ground. Depends when, right? For me, when I do my broadcast and trample, it's usually I take over a piece of grain land, it's tilled up, and then I'm going to convert everything to perennials. Okay, I mean, that just so everybody knows, whenever I do a cover crop, it's to go back to perennials if it's on my land. So it's got a mix of annuals and perennials with it. So when I mob graze on it, though, too, perfectly, if I can time it perfectly, just before a rainstorm, right? Get out there and the rain's coming, broadcast that out there, turn your animals out there, get her done in a day or two, right? If the piece is too big, well, then you shrink it down. But whatever's growing probably already, it's pretty sporadic. So you don't need that high stock density, and they pretty well walk everywhere and stir everything up. But if you get too much rain, then they punch it out, and now you're doing damage. So just that 1/2 inch of rain, boy, you can get a nice catch that way.